on the road, in the gym, at a coffee house. No matter where you listen, this is Prevention Perk. I'm Steve Miller with Mid-America PTTC. It's time to perk up our prevention efforts. My guest today is Colber Prosper, a global advocate dedicated to advancing service-providing institutions through strategic planning, organizational leadership, and equity and inclusion. Passionate about democratic engagement, he has written on the decline of political involvement among college students. He teaches political science and ethics, and in his 2018 book, No Entry, Examining the Power That Undermines Our Full Potential, explores how political power perpetuates inequities. 10 years ago, he founded Prosper and Partners with the vision of helping people collaborate more effectively. Hello, Colber, and welcome to Prevention Perk.
Hey, how you doing, Steve? Thank you for having me.
Hey, this is great. I'm excited to hear about your life and some of the things that you've accomplished. We've never really officially met before until just today, and I did a little background research on you, and you've really covered a lot of ground, and I'm excited to hear about your book. I know you did a TED Talk in the past. You run your own organization. You're a CATCA trainer. Whew. So you're a busy guy. You got a lot to talk about. I'm excited about it. The first question I think the audience wants to know is, what was your path to prevention? What was it that one day Colber said, hey, I'm kind of interested in this kind of work?
Steve, a great intro, and thank you for that. Glad to be here, and I'm glad I'm able to make a new friend through a friend, right? So that's wonderful when the world works that way. So for me, I dare say it, Steve. I dare say it. The reason and the how I've got involved in prevention was through my DARE officer. It's true. It is true, people. And the reason, if you're not in prevention, the reason I'm making fun of this is that the program DARE gets a lot of flack around being effectiveness. Was it really effective? And if you're using scientific measures, you can see that it could have been better. Um, but the thing about and I love our conversation, Steve. The thing about prevention is like the je ne sais quoi, the essence of it, the thing that brings people together, the magic of prevention, which you can't really measure per se. And so my DARE officer was at my school. I got involved in DARE as early as first grade, and it was an after-school program, and he was the coolest guy in the world after my dad. And as I was graduating elementary school and going to middle school, he said, well, say, we don't have DARE at your middle school, but there is this program that's starting. And back then, it was called Defy a Drug-Free Youth in Town. And this is the early 90s, Steve. So I think we also have to remember that prevention itself as a science is relatively new, right? And so this is the early 90s where people are talking about prevention, where we're starting to write about it. We're starting to create some scientific models. And around that time, the United Way, Broward County, and at the time it was called Commission on Substance Abuse. Now it's called Commission on Behavioral Health and Drug Prevention, was working on young people, working with young people to build their leadership skills so that they can make better decisions and also be peers to their friends about the message of staying drug free. And so I got involved with that at the age of 12 and 13. And I haven't looked back since. And the reason I stayed involved, especially at that age, it was fun. I got to meet kids from across the county. I got to go to conferences. We had a youth leadership banquet. We ran our own activities. So it was something that I was very much involved. And I like to tell people, it was how I was raised. They were part of my village. I had my family, my parents, and church, and all of those things, and also the coalition. And so I got involved as early as that. stayed involved because of intentional initiatives to keep young professionals in the field, to keep professionals of color in the field. And for that, I have continued to be in the field.
When you tell that story, wouldn't it be great if we had more people that we could collect that said, prevention's basically all I've known my whole life. Like people think I want to be a baseball player or I want to be a police officer when I grow up or whatever that looks like. People saying, I'd like to work in this prevention field because that's a great track for someone to really have an interest in from the very beginning because that's a life that's founded basically in trying to make the community a better place.
Yeah, and to be at that age as teenager and other adults saying that you have that potential to do that, um, it just it really opens your eyes to um your own possibilities. So and from that work and in my book, No Entry, I talk about the three beliefs. Um, and it's very much believe in yourself, find something to believe in, and find and allow other two people to believe in you. And that comes straight from my coalition work at that age because I'm 12 and 13, and these adults are saying, you can change your community. I'm like, I can. And back then, I was pretty shy, I didn't say much, speech impediment. So I was like, I don't see it. um, but they were very much like, you can do this. We're going to show you how to do this, and we're going to be supporting you every step of the way. And I mean, that's what we all need.
You're listening to Prevention Perk. The funder of this project, along with all the other products of the Mid-America PTTC, is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Although funded by SAMHSA, the content of this recording does not necessarily reflect the views of SAMHSA. Creating a Healthier Life, a guide published by SAMHSA, is available free of charge and offers a broad approach for things we can do at our own pace, in our own time, and within our own abilities that can help us feel better and live longer. You can find a link in our show notes.
At some point, you got involved with CATCA, and before we started to record, you told me that you represent them as an international, an adult, and a youth trainer. So you're covering a lot of ground there. Kind of unpack that a little bit. How'd you get the ear of CATCA, and then what was that path like to become that level of a trainer for them?
And so I was in grad school. I was in University of Tennessee College of Student Personnel in grad school, and my and I stayed involved with my coalition, and my coalition would always reach out to me when they needed me, and so it was something to where I would go back and be a keynote speaker for their leadership conference, and or if we were working on some legislation on the pill mills down in South Florida. So they had me come down and talk to the senator. So it was always one of those things. I was always involved with the coalition. And at the time, CACA was coming out with the ambassador program. And this is how I met Ricky Barton. And so CACA was coming out with ambassador program. And the program was designed to keep young professionals in the field. And in graduate school, I was tracked to go into higher education. That's my background is education. And so I did prevention. It was something I always knew and did, but to your point, I didn't know if I saw myself working in the field the rest of my life. It was just something I always did, but not sure if it was something professionally I would do. And so CACA came out with the ambassador program, and the ambassador program was specifically designed to keep young professionals in the prevention field. And we know that that's hard to keep young professionals. They got 2 years max, and they're out. About what 40-50% of young professionals leave the field. So CACA came out with this, and it was a national search. My prevention coordinator at the time, Joe Tolliver, says, you need to apply. I said, Joe, I love you. I'm in grad school. I ain't got time for this. I'm like, I've got my research. I've got my practicums. He's like, do it. And I was like, all right, bro. I'm doing this for you. But I don't have the time. And so I applied, and I was admitted. And then it was like, all right, a part of the CACA ambassador program was that you had to go through the National Coalition Academy or Institute. So you had to dedicate a year to be trained through CACA's material. So I managed to get permission from my program chair, my master's program chair, and she let me go, and we finished. And then we had to do a capstone project. And with that capstone project, a CACA staff member had to review your capstone. All that being said, I go through that and I was like, you know what, man? I think I want to train prevention. And I'm very passionate about young people because that's where I started. Um, I was like, I think I want to do this. And I ended up getting a job at a school. I was running a multicultural office and going to CACA events on my own dime to stay engaged and to be like, I want to become a trainer. And went through their application process, and I was accepted to go through their youth trainers of trainers. And then with that, um, because I identify as Haitian African American and my Haitian background, the international program tapped me to do some work and also in Haiti. And then they have their own trainer of trainers program. And then the adult or the domestic side, when you talked about the National Coalition Academy, I went through the training of trainers, and that's Mr. Carlton Hall trained me on that, and also on the international side. And so I went through all of the training of trainers for all the departments. And I think for me is I because I started doing this work so early, community to me is like the status quo. Like having community, being in community is what I know. And when it doesn't exist, it doesn't make sense to me. And and so wherever I can do that in the capacity that I am in creating community, that's what I know, that's what I do, and that's what I've been doing, right? And so I've been able to do this in different fields, in different areas, and also across the different departments of CACA because are the moments we have together, how do we create community? And when we create community, then we can start talking about what are some of the protective factors that are in a room or in that specific community. How do we propagate that? And how do we make other people feel what we're currently feeling?
You're listening to Prevention Perk. A podcast is like a breakout session from your daily routine. It's a unique way to perk up your prevention efforts. We'd like to hear from you. Please send your comment, topic, or guest suggestion to midamericapttc@gmail.com.
You know, it's interesting. You're telling me that story, and I'm thinking it's like watching someone put together a puzzle. And you're like, okay, I know this piece. I'm looking for this image. This goes over here. And it's like those pieces of your puzzle, they just add up. And it's like, it all makes sense. And it's to me, I always think that's exactly how life was meant to be for you. It's like you just signed up for like a beeline to where you're at today, and it all just seems to work from that simple, just that seed that was planted, back in what, fifth, sixth grade. You've really just
Yeah.
yeah, you just took a chance on dare, and look what happened. That's great.
And
Uh, I,
it,
I
it's
I watched your TED talk, and I thought, a couple of things in that I want you to talk a little bit about. I think this was a quote that I think you attributed to someone else. I am because of you. And then later you said, you are my other me. And I'm like, now those are really powerful statements to make because you're talking about powering potential for impact and you're talking to high school students. So can you kind of flesh that out a little bit? And I like the whole premise of like, I'm only better because you're better, and we're only better because we're better, that kind of a philosophy.
and so that poem comes from Alacash, poet, and Spanish poet. And when I was writing the book, and I came across his work, and I was just like, wow, this is what it's about. So, born and raised in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Broward County, throw the mails up 954, and I had a pretty good upbringing, uh, Haitian enclave. Most of my friends and family were Haitian, but also being raised in South Florida, which is one of the most diverse areas in the country. Um, and with brilliant people, like people in my high school class, we just had our high school reunion, 20th reunion. People in my class went to Harvard, Princeton, Columbia, and doing all of these great things. And Steve, believe it or not, I was a class clown. And I didn't at the time I didn't really apply myself. I knew I could, but I was more interested in other things. And and so to come out of Fort Lauderdale, and again, I appreciate my upbringing. I appreciate all the people that were part of who I am today. But I knew as I got older, I knew coming out of Fort Lauderdale, I wasn't the smartest, I wasn't the fastest, I wasn't the best looking, and some of those people didn't make it for a host of reasons. Um, and and so I was in graduate school, and you often and you take that with you, and I at least I do. I take that with me, right? All these great people that for some reason all didn't make it, and it didn't add up to me. It wasn't. It was just the math wasn't mathing, and a professor, Dr. Fritz Polite, was he was talking to us. And he was talking about power, and I was a political science major, and I was like, power, like we didn't really talk about that in class. So I dove in, started researching, and then it clicked for me. It was like, wow, like all these people I grew up with that had enormous amount of potential because of the powers that be, they weren't able to realize it. And my premise in No Entry is that because people aren't able to realize their potential, I'm not going to be able to fully realize my potential because we're interconnected. And so I remember when Broward County Schools did a cutoff age of students. And if you were age, this specific age at this specific grade, they kicked you out. So you're talking about thousands of kids now having to find other ways to get their diploma. Like, what do you think happened to them? Right? That is a policy that was passed, and thousands of lives were impacted. Right. And so when we talk about power, when we talk about who's in power, when we talk about how we use power, in whatever sphere of power do we have, are we positively impacting someone else's potential? Are we negatively impacting, or or is it neutral? And I think if we walk around being cognizant of that, I like to believe I think we would make better decisions or more informed decisions. And or if we're going to make a decision about a group of people, at least they'll be at the table. But that's I'm an idealist, so
Well,
who
you know, you're
knows?
saying something that makes me, I mean, I'm drawing my own personal kind of connection here. I've done a talk on how music impacts our choices. And I think that's what you're talking about here with that. Are you doing it for a positive reason? Are you using your power for a negative reason? And I think what all too often happens is we forget, meaning the individual, that we have this tremendous power to choose whether or not we go this way, that way, whether it's positive, whether it's negative. Too often it seems like we just kind of go with the flow, or we kind of think, well, this is what I should do or where I should go, or instead of really kind of owning that sense of power that comes with being alive, being an individual, being a human. I'm learning this later in life than it sounds like you did, that you really can make tremendous choice in your life. And it seems like everyone
I would,
knows it, but it's still a secret. Does it, you know what I'm saying?
that's it. That's it, right? Say less, Steve. Because that's what it is.
Now I want to talk about your book, and I'm interested about this one because the entry just doesn't really flesh out the whole thing. You're talking about examining the power that undermines our full potential, but you're really looking at how political structures or social structures are in place that really kind of work against that. It can either it can perpetuate those inequities. As you're saying, a policy can prohibit individuals from graduating from high school. And I'm sure you go beyond just exploring that particular issue, but talk a little bit about your book, No Entry.
Yeah, so and I'll tell you, I've been fortunate to really work with some great people and great organizations. And in graduate school, I was able to work with Professor Carla McCanders, who was an immigration attorney, and one of the top scholars in that field. I was also able to work with Dr. Terrell Strayhorn, higher education, top five when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, higher education, and other organizations. So I've been fortunate to work with great minds and be under their tutelage, and so to work in different. And I feel like I do identify myself as a multidisciplinary scholar. And so to work in these various disciplines and to see and I didn't have words for it back then, but to see that that stream or that line of like, whoa, why, what, why is that happening, or why did that happen? And so I'm very thankful for Dr. Fritz Polite, because he was like, look at power, and I did, and it was just like, wow. Um, so 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 power can be seen in let me define power. Power is the ability for you to get what you want. Your ability to get what you want. Um, One might be the agenda. I don't want to explain all of that. So bore people. um, yeah, I guess I would have to. So one form of power is issue, and that means that I want to exert my power on this issue to get what I want. So if you and I want if you want vanilla cake and I want velvet cake, I'd be like, the issue is which cake we get, and I'm going to exert my power whichever way I can for us to get velvet cake, right? The next form of power is agenda. Agenda is you control the agenda to get what you want. So if I know you and I are going to talk about these cakes, I'm going to send you an agenda about the types of cakes and the meeting, the order of how we're going to meet and what we're going to talk about. And I'm going to construct the agenda in a way for I can get what I want. And this is very simplified, but that's what it means. And then the last type of power is manipulation. And manipulation is me trying to convince you that the velvet cake is better for you, even if it's not better for you, right? And so, um, and so when I was looking at the research and reading the different concepts of power, I was able to then tag, oh, this is what this looks like in this community. This is what this looks like in that community. This is what is happening in this community. And so one of the things I kind of talked about I talked about the Flint water crisis, which was huge back in 2017 and it's still going on. And you look at when you look at the meeting orders, when you look at are saying the people in charge control the agenda. Like, people are saying that there was a water crisis, but the way they set the agenda up, what they talked about, what they were allowed to talk about, what they were allowed to share, made it in a way that created the problem that we're seeing. Now, people are like, it wasn't intentional. Are they bad people? That's not the discussion where we're having. Discussion where we're having is they use this type of power to get what they want. Steve, I think we've done this works long enough. I now speak for myself. getting stuck and thinking about people's intentions can just put you in a very bad place. And when we talk about prevention, when we talk about behavioral health, it's much easier to talk about people's behavior, right? And wherever that comes from, whatever that means for them, that's one thing. But we can point to behavior. One, we can measure it, and two, we can see its impact. And so I'm not interested in saying like people are bad or people are this or that. I'm more interested in saying what are your actions doing to impact other people? And if we can quantify that, identify that, then I think there's a discussion we can have of how do we change the way we do things in order so more people can realize their full potential, even begin to imagine themselves more than what they currently are. And I feel like I'm rambling. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, you get me fired up, Steve.
I'm tracking with you. I totally understand what you're saying, and I'm going to kind of come out of left field. I've never asked anybody this question, and but I'm curious to see what your answer would be. Colbert, tell me what your life's philosophy is.
I would say using all that I have, all that I am, to eradicate systematic oppression.
That's fantastic.
You're listening to Prevention Perk. Powering Potential for Impact is a TED Talk delivered at Lynbrook High School and discusses how our potential, power, and impact are connected and interrelated. Colber Prosper will make the argument that if we aren't aware of how we use our power, we will inhibit others and ourselves from reaching our full potential. A link to view this presentation is available in our show notes.
I've really enjoyed this conversation, and before we get away, I have the opportunity to let you kind of be the sage on the stage, if you will. Is there something that we haven't talked about that you'd like the audience to know, think, say, or do differently as a result of having, had this conversation? It's kind of your chance to be the sage on the stage.
I think what I want to go back to, Steve, is what we talked about earlier about prevention. It allows people the space to be creative, to imagine, and to bring your own to it. And that's the only way it's going to move forward. That's the only way we can create a culture of prevention. We're looking at the CDC, Center of Disease Control, Youth Behavioral Risk Survey came out, and it showed that during the pandemic, that 42% of young people felt sad and or hopeless, so much so they couldn't do regular activities. 42%, Steve. Like, what does that mean 10 years from now when we know that the health behaviors adolescents learn now is going to impact them in their adulthood? And I guess as the sage on the stage right now, what are you going to bring to prevention so that our young people can make better decisions for themselves, for their loved ones, and for each other? Pew Research showed that mental health is one of the top 5 things young people are talking about. They don't know what to do. And if we don't teach them, they're going to learn it from somewhere. And we can't say that other place is going to help them figure it out. And what I call for, my call to action is, what is your role in prevention? And prevention is big enough, welcoming enough for you to be that for us so we can save our young people.
My guest on this episode has been Colber Prosper. You'll be able to find some links to connect with him in our show notes. Appreciate you being here. Thanks a lot, Colber, for being a guest.
Appreciate you, Steve. I hope you have me come again if I didn't bore you.
Thank you for listening to Prevention Perk, a podcast from Mid-America PTTC. To learn more about our innovations, visit pttcnetwork.org and look under your PTTC for the Mid-America link. Remember, prevention is better together, and together we are stronger.